SpaceX's IPO prospectus talks about building a spacefaring civilization, making humanity multiplanetary, and creating trillion-dollar economies on the moon, Mars, and beyond. It is absurd. No other prospectus could say that the company's mission is to understand the true nature of the universe and extend the light of consciousness to the stars. It even says we do not want humans to suffer the same fate as dinosaurs. Unlike typical IPO prospectus, which share legal and statutory information and put you to sleep after a few pages, the SpaceX prospectus reads like a science fiction in many parts, sprinkled with fancy pictures of rockets. I even thought I was reading InGen's prospectus of listing their Jurassic Park amusement park. Now, the obvious question is, are investors funding the future of humanity, or are they funding the most expensive experiment in human history, or are they investing money to save up for retirement, their kids' education, or even buying a house? At a valuation of $2 trillion, SpaceX is aiming to raise $75 to $80 billion, more than triple of the previous largest IPOs. Saudi Aramco raised $26 billion in 2019 and Alibaba $22 billion in 2014. All this for a company that recorded a loss of $4.6 billion in 2025 and has already lost $4.2 billion in the first 3 months of 2026. After giving money to SpaceX, investors get Class A shares, which have 1 vote per share, while Class B shareholders enjoy 10 votes per share and control majority of the board appointments. The management will have significant flexibility in using the IPO proceeds with no recourse available to Class A shareholders. Elon Musk alone would retain more than 80% of voting rights despite owning just over 40% of the company. The prospectus showcases an ambitious and crazy vision of Elon Musk, and today we will break down SpaceX's business, where it stands versus its ambition, what would investors be paying if they choose to bet on SpaceX, and if SpaceX will keep coming back to the market for more and more money. The entire ambition of SpaceX is dependent on just one thing: Starship. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why almost every major claim in the SpaceX story depends on the Starship. So what exactly is SpaceX? Most people think of SpaceX as a rocket company or a satellite internet company. But if you see where SpaceX is spending money, it is positioning itself as an AI company. In 2025, SpaceX generated $18.6 billion in revenue. Connectivity contributed 61% of revenues, space 22%, and AI 17%. But where SpaceX stands today is very different from where it wants to be tomorrow. SpaceX has identified a total addressable market, excluding China and Russia, of $28.5 trillion, of which $26.5 trillion is AI. And SpaceX's capital expenditure shows its outsized bets on AI. Total capex increased from $4.4 billion in 2023 to $20.7 billion in 2025. In just first 3 months of 2026, SpaceX spent another $10 billion. More than 77% of that spending went towards AI. Annualized capex for 2026 is on track to be above $40 billion. Because SpaceX wants to put data centers in space. Let's quickly understand the businesses that are expected to make this possible. Business 1 is rockets. SpaceX launches rockets for governments, enterprises, and its own internal businesses such as Starlink. To date, the company has completed more than 650 launches and claims over 80% market share of global payload mass delivered to orbit. Now, credit where due. SpaceX has fundamentally changed the economics of space launches. Historically, launch costs averaged roughly $18,500 per kilogram, and SpaceX took it down to approximately $1,400 per kilogram by 2018. Through Starship, SpaceX wants to further reduce this cost. Despite all the attention rockets receive, the space segment generated only $4 billion of revenue and $650 million of adjusted EBITDA in 2025. The reason rockets matter is not because they generate profits. They are the transportation system for everything else SpaceX wants to build. The prospectus makes it clear that a growing share of launch capacity will be used internally for SpaceX's AI business. Before we discuss the AI vertical, let's discuss the only profitable business of SpaceX, which is business number 2, connectivity. Starlink operates a constellation of more than 9,600 satellites and serves over 10 million subscribers across 164 countries. Its customers include consumers, enterprises, and governments. Starlink is already generating meaningful profits. In 2025, the connectivity segment produced $11.4 billion in revenues and a profit of $1.1 billion. One may wonder if the connectivity segment shows the potential of the SpaceX business. It took a difficult engineering challenge and turned it into a commercially viable product. While Starlink's customer base rapidly expands, the average revenue per user, that is ARPU, will steadily decline as lower priced plans are introduced outside North America. ARPUs have already fallen from $81 in 2025 to $66 during the first quarter of 2026. Now, let's discuss the business around which SpaceX is weaving its entire narrative. Business 3, AI. SpaceX's AI business includes Grok, X, AI compute infrastructure, all brought under one roof following the acquisition of XAI in 2026. The company wants to vertically integrate the entire AI stack: energy, compute infrastructure, semiconductors, models, applications. It is pursuing chip manufacturing through Terafab in partnership with Tesla and Intel. It is developing agentic AI products through MacroHard in partnership with Tesla. Isn't MacroHard the bang opposite of Microsoft? But the truly interesting part isn't Grok, X, or even chip manufacturing. It is what SpaceX believes will become the biggest bottleneck in artificial intelligence: energy. See, every AI company today faces the same challenge. More powerful models require more compute, more chips, and more electricity. Eventually, power becomes the bottleneck. SpaceX's solution sounds ridiculous. Move the compute into space. Now we come to the crazy parts of the prospectus. SpaceX wants to deploy 100 gigawatts of compute power every year to space via satellites, starting as early as 2028. For context, today SpaceX operates 1 gigawatt of total compute power on Earth. To deploy 100 gigawatts every year, SpaceX will require 10,000 launches carrying a total of 1 million metric tons of payload. In 2025, SpaceX did 170 launches with 2,213 metric tons of payload. SpaceX is targeting increasing its launch capacity by 60 times. It plans to achieve this feat through fully reusable Starships capable of carrying 100 and eventually 200 metric tons of payload. For comparison, Falcon 9 rockets carry 13 metric tons of payload and only the first stage is reusable. The prospectus states that these projections are based on engineering analysis and existing technologies and do not require any breakthrough in physics. But then in the risk factors, they say this. The company believes it can manufacture AI compute satellites at scale, launch them cheaply, and power them using unlimited solar energy in space. So, what are investors paying for? Investing in SpaceX now is a bet on Starship. For all of SpaceX ambitions to become a reality, Starship must carry 100 to 200 metric tons of payload. It must become fully reusable, and multiple Starships must collectively perform thousands of launches every year, all while dramatically reducing the launch costs. This is an enormous leap from what exists today. If this does not happen, the entire narrative falls flat, and investors will realize that they paid a $2 trillion valuation for a satellite based connectivity provider who also does rocket launches and whose AI product Grok is way behind competition. Now, keep in mind, OpenAI and Anthropic are lining up their own trillion-dollar IPOs soon, expected in 2026. SpaceX will keep coming back for funds. Remember that scene from the Big Bang Theory where Sheldon Cooper asks for $20 million from the university to create a micro black hole and ends up explaining how once you give him $20 million, he can keep asking for 50, 80, $100 million, and the university thinks we have already put in so much, so we can't leave the project midway. Well, it looks like a similar thing will happen with SpaceX. They're raising 75 to 80 billion for a $28 trillion TAM they identified, and they're on track to incur a capex of 40 billion in 2026. At this pace, they would burn through the IPO raise in 1.5 years, given none of SpaceX's current businesses generate sufficient cash to fund this scale of capex. 100 gigawatts per year is equivalent to 8% of US power generation capacity, and solar is 5% of power generation in US after years of hundreds of billions of dollars in investments. Eventually, SpaceX will come knocking for investments again and again from the public markets. While going through the prospectus and news, some additional details caught my eye. On 1st May, Nasdaq revised the rules for index inclusion, making it possible for SpaceX to enter the index within 15 days of listing, which would trigger a buying of around $25 to $27 billion from the index tracking ETFs as per market analysts. It can even be included in the S&P 500 within 6 months of listing. Elon Musk started XAI outside of Tesla and merged it with SpaceX in Feb 2026. This transaction valued XAI at 250 billion and SpaceX at 1.25 trillion. In the future, SpaceX shares could be used for acquiring other entities owned by Elon Musk. There are related party transactions such as $500 million spent to buy Megapack products from Tesla, $131 million to buy Cybertrucks at retail prices in 2025. So going forward, you can expect even more related party transactions with Elon Musk owned entities. SpaceX's board of directors, essentially Elon Musk, can issue Class A shares to acquire Cursor for $60 billion. And if they don't, they pay $1.5 billion in termination fee and $8.5 billion in deferred service fees. The company is working with Cursor to improve Grok. SpaceX spent 46% of 2025 revenues on research and development. The company expects R&D spends to increase as a percentage of revenues in the space and AI verticals as the company continues to spend on the development of Starship, compute infrastructure, and the training of Grok and their agreement with Cursor. SpaceX owns 18,000 plus bitcoins worth $1.5 billion. Volatility in Bitcoin prices will flow through to the quarterly earnings. SpaceX has a bridge loan of $20 billion which matures in September 2027. A part of the IPO raise will have to be applied towards payment of this loan. SpaceX's future markets include space tourism, passenger and cargo transport to the moon and Mars, energy production and manufacturing on moon and Mars, and asteroid mining. Great technological advances have always come when conventional thinking was challenged. SpaceX has done it with rocket launches and Starlink. I would love to see them use solar energy for data centers and AI compute. But as an investor, here is what I think. Maybe SpaceX gives an initial pop due to passive flows and low float, but I don't see how this makes money over the next few years. I believe a few years later, we would look back at the SpaceX IPO as the beginning of the end game of the AI bubble. Would you invest in the SpaceX IPO? I wouldn't.